All right, Lions fans, let's talk. I recently saw a video of the, I guess it was a comparison video of the two, this regime, the this current Lions regime, and as well as the previous one, and they did a comparison of the War Room. I guess the interactions of announcing their first overall, their first draft, their first overall pick together. You have Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, and on the other hand, you have uh, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and you see the different atmosphere and so forth. I guess that was a point of emphasis to show, okay, the intake of uh, I want to say the personalities of those two are or the brain trust of both regimes. But I want to point out one thing in very specific and make it very put emphasis on this one thing, and that is that both regimes were affected by the ownership, and you're going to hear a lot of credibility towards this current regime based upon this, and then then people were triggered towards, well, then the owner is doing things differently. Well, there's a difference of the two ownerships. Now you can easily say, okay, well, Mrs. Ford, uh, I think it's Martha. Uh, she inherited from her late husband, and she took over from that. And then you also would say for Mrs. Ford Hamp that how she took over from her mother. What I bring those two situations up for this reason: their ownership. I mean, well, the personnel um, stems off the ownership. On one hand, let's talk about Miss Ford. On one hand, she has like this. The difference is of the two ownership is one has the appearance or the I want to say aura of loftiness, and the other regime has the appearance of what you will call ambitious, or being a viciousness, or I want to say a bit, you can see that with Miss Ford, Bob Quinn, and Patricia, they have like this we've been there, done that type approach, which means to say that they have in respectable fields, they have been to the very top, right? And they're quite content there. They really have nothing to prove, from that perspective. So it's going to be a laid back, really, people would look at it as a bland or unenergetic type enthusiasm, but actually it's not. If you've been there before, if you had something before, you're not. You really won't get excited as much as you would your first time around, unless the second time you received it, it can up the ante on the impact of his existence. Okay, you bought your first car. Nothing will top that until you surpass that with something that you have to be in. I don't want to say a dire straits, type of situation for the ante to get up, because you can go buy another new car, but yet and still it won't be the first new car. The first new car is special because you didn't have anything and you desired something, versus going off of something that you have and recreating that desire, man. I don't know if that's possible, but it definitely a person can attempt to do it. But anyway, versus the other approach when you already have it, it's great, and that's how I believe that the Fords, Bob Quinn, and Matt Patricia, they were very lofty, and I believe that rubbed the city of Detroit the wrong way. I think it rubbed the city the wrong way. De- Detroit is a very unique place. It's a combination of two worlds. It's a world that is pretentious, and the world that a reality that's very desperate, like for star status. It when it gets something, it's pretentious to be that's who it is, like it's a star status. But at the same time, it hasn't done it long enough, or hasn't continued to do it, not just one time, but multiple times over. And so it becomes pretentious in that regard. But if you were to look at Brad Holmes and excuse me, Mrs. Ford Hamp, Brad Holmes, and Dan Campbell, their approach is kind of different. They haven't done anything. They're sort of trying to make a name for themselves. Now, you could say, well, Mrs. Ford Hamp is coming up the legacy of her parents, but yet and still, she doesn't have her own name. So there's going to be a energy from her that is not, I want to say nostalgic. It's going to be it's going to seem very genuine and authentic, so to speak, but yet and still is fresh because it has nothing to go off of. If she could do it, she have a clean slate. Brad Holmes has a clean slate. Dan Campbell has a clean slate. That's the one thing about this current regime versus the previous regime is that the approach of the ownership is totally different. It's totally different. You talking about Mrs. Ford when she inherited the team? She's what 80, maybe 70s, 80s, if that 80s, 90s. Well, she's nowhere near the age of her daughter. Her daughter's like in her 60s, mid to late 60s, I believe, and it's a totally different deal. What can you arguably pretty much? How can you get Mrs. Ford to be excited about running a franchise, a football franchise, a sports franchise? Let's say that way. What can you get her to be excited about? I mean, she's lofty. I mean, she have done everything in from being the wife of I guess of her husband in the auto business, and it was lucrative. From that where it didn't leave to be desperate, or it didn't leave a taste for to to be that much more ambitious. You can kind of cruise it. And I believe Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia took that approach. Where they came from that environment. They didn't come from a 9-7 atmosphere. They didn't come from, hey, we're gonna win the division. Hey, we're just gonna make sure that we put forth a good competitive team, or get some names, and get some people in the crowds. And no, they had an owner in Mr. Kraft that wanted to win, and he did it with such like I want to say a missing element that the Fords have lacked. It's like a cheap quality, like approach, or essence. It is do the very best on the cheap versus being cheap on doing your best. It's a difference. And one is more responsible, the other one is like less attentive. So to details of that, so a lot of things could get uh, a lot of things could slip through the cracks and swept up under the rugs, so to speak. So a lot of the I's and the T's doesn't get dotted and crossed. But with Mr. Kraft, he's he did it on the cheap. He wasn't frugal. It's just the fact that he was more involved. And what I mean by that is that he made everything count. With So if you have an organization that's like that, I mean, well, if you're not an organization, you have an owner that's like that, you get you one guy that you could build off of, and you could build you a dynasty. And that's what they did. I'm going to say one one guy, as in the head coach, to run the operation, and then you can get that head coach can pick his own, like his self-made like personality to run the football team as a player acquisition, and that's where they got Tom Brady. Tom Brady was a mini Bill Belichick without all the experiences. He was a mini. They was kind of like they saw things kind of like similar the same way. So it's kind of easy. So when Bob, Mr. Kraft have, in his position, if he could get somebody to see it how he see it and approach it how he approach it, one and the same, right? So you have yourself Bill Belichick, and then if Bill Belichick can get a player personnel that he can see it the same way that he sees it, and approach it the way he approach it, it can work out well. Now you got that with Tom Brady, and now you have those three ducks in a row, and there's your dynasty. In most cases, in ownership, it's never that way. It's a lightning in a bottle, where you can get an owner that wants it done mainly on the cheap, not really that attentive to detail until the ball starts rolling. Oh, that's any business that is not really your mainstay. If it's something like a hobby or something that it's something that you just do, it is not really you're not gonna really be that much self-involved unless that is your baby. Which I went on the record by saying, if this current ownership, such as Miss Ford Hamp and company, is going to be successful, she's going to have to make this her baby. The rebuild doesn't start with player personnel; it starts with ownership. She's going to really have to be really involved, and involved to the extent that everything matters. Everything matters, not just you know um, upper management acquisitions. You're not just, you know, uh, I guess you could say the nutritionists, and even you could say the financialologists or whatever, even player personnel. All that has to matter, but more so that she can't really have any attachments to anything else prior to get her focus. You look at like we were just talking about with Mr. Kraft. He really didn't have nothing else to get his attention. When Mr. Ford had the team, he had the auto business, so that had his attention. You know, so the Lions, franchise as a sports team, it's like a hobby. It it I won't say it demands attention. It can create attention, but not necessarily a must that you have to be keen on detail because everything really doesn't matter. It's like extra. It's like a side job. You know, it's not the main job. The main job is the one that gives you all the benefits, and it take care of you in a way that you can't afford to lose anything unless you get a bit beside yourself. But when it comes to the side job is just what it is. It's there to be an addition. It's not there to be the prized possession. So it's okay. And you appreciate it to some degree, but nowhere near to the extent of the one that's taking care of you. The one is your source per se. So I believe that's how the ownership kind of like Mr. Ford kind of took it. Like but with the current ownership, Mrs. Ford Hamp, she would when I said the rebuild starts with her, she would have to take it in as like this matters, and that means that you're very attentive to detail. And attention to detail is that every it's like that principle So like if you have two principals or two ownerships, the let's say ownerships, you have the one ownership that they the owner of the business, and they pretty much attentive to certain things, and but not overly self-involved. You know, they're gonna let the operation runs itself. If they hire the right people, it would take care of itself. That's how I believe Mr. Ford and Mrs. Ford were. In comparison to Mrs. Ford Hamp would have to be, she would have to know her personnel. She would have to know everything. If she's gonna make this, if she's gonna surpass the legacy of the prior two, she's gonna have to be really involved. And that means that will require for her not to have really nothing outside of that going on. It would really have to be her baby, and I don't know if that's the case. So far, I want to take it my spin that it's like a PR stunt, that you got to get rid of the bad stench of the attempt of loftiness, you know. So you upgrade everything, but you don't tear it down, so it's considered not a renovation. I guess you could say it's a renovation, but that doesn't make it new. It's still being built off the same foundation. So what will actually make it new is that some of the foundation has to be torn down and replaced. So I want to end with that, but all right. My take on the two regimes is that they're still synonymous. They're still one and the same in a regard that the foundation hasn't been changed. The foundation, what I mean by the foundation hasn't been changed, it has to be approached as like uh, I want to say, hmm, the owner has to approach it like that's her main concern. Like running this organization or running this franchise, the sports franchise is her main concern. I don't know if she has her a personal, business or in anything involvement of that. I don't know much about her other her inheriting the team. No fault to her. She has a family that was considered substantial. I mean, in that regard, and generational type deal. So I'm not harping on that. However, if that foundation is going to change, she's going to have to change it. The whole approach that she really going to have to be involved. Not enough just to get it going. She's going to have to be really involved. Really, really, really involved. Like that's her go-to benefactor. So, with that being said, Lions fans, a salute. Wait, let me see if there's anything else that I want to talk about. I guess, yeah, I'm going to end off with the enthusiasm of the Mrs. Ford Hamp and Company. Let's say Mrs. Ford Hamp regime in comparison to Mrs. Ford regime. It's just that one has something to prove, the other one doesn't. Even Mrs. Ford Hamp doesn't have much. She don't have. She's not. She doesn't really have like a. There don't have to be an urgency about having something to prove. But if she want to be out of the shadow or have a name for herself, that's just it. If she doesn't want it, listen. If she do not approach it like as though she want a name for herself, it's going to repeat the same. The foundation will still be the same, and the results are ultimately going to be the same. You're going to paint the house with some quality color paint, but yet still the house is still going to be structurally made the same. And the individual that's on the outside looking at it, they're gonna say, "Oh, this is a new. It looks new. Get the appearance of something new." But actually, it's not. It's just a new paint job. And some people can consider that as a renovation. You know, it is to a certain extent. It's on a minor extent, but you know, but you can actually make some additions, to make it your own. Some people, when they purchase a home, if it hasn't been done, which a lot of people, when they're purchasing a home, from my understanding, they really, they really require that the owner doesn't address the roofing per se. They prefer to do it their way because they could actually put their own, they could customize it. They can do, lay it out, put their, their stamp on it. And so I'm saying it to say that Mrs. Ford Hamp will have to do the same thing. Now, the house, may have a roof, it may need to be upgraded, and she would prefer, a homeowner, newly person who's purchasing a home, they may prefer that, that the previous owner don't do the roof. However, the previous owner is being told by, uh, the what are they called? I can't speak of the agents who does the selling of the house. They may tell you that the value of the home may increase by getting the roof done, but for the new owner, in most cases, I think in most cases, but in some cases, and I want to say that they will prefer to do the roofing themselves. So Miss Ford Hamp can actually put her own stamp on it if she modified the roofing. Not literally modify the roofing, but you know, take a foundation piece off and add it. No matter what department it may be, if it's person or upper management, if it's uh, during the facilities, you can say uh, player personnel. What, however that it was ran by the previous two regimes, she will have to do an addition with subtraction, that type of deal, if she's going to make it to her own. Otherwise, it's going to be built the same way. And people can say, no, she's going to do it a little differently, and it'll have to be built the same way, even though she's, if you're not going to take something down and uh, put it and replace it with something, then it's still the same. You could paint over it, but it's still the same. Uh, if you were to add a deck to your house or something, that is, it's not a key addition versus like if you were to remodel a kitchen or something. And say like if you had it was a smaller kitchen and you tore out a wall and you expanded and made it a larger kitchen, you know, it gives it actually that's an addition to the house. It's a huge addition to the house, not building a section to the house, but it's an addition to the house. And I'll give that more emphasis of a renovation, or a rebuild. I think it's a rebuild, but renovation more so than throwing some paint on it and saying, okay, this is a renovation. Anyway, that is my take. With that being said, Lions fans, I salute.